Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners, we would love for you to join our Patreon community over at www.patreon.com/femfreak. Do it today. Oh yeah, every time the game offered me the choice to like drink something or smoke up, I was like, God, I really want to do this. I've got an 11-year-old that I gotta watch.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio, the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Carolyn Pettit, taking over hosting duties this week for Anita, who's off on another one of her damn fool adventures. I'm joined, as usual, by my fellow wayward young traveler, Ebony Adams. Hey, Ebony.
Hey, Carolyn.
In today's episode, we're going to be discussing Life is Strange 2, Episode 3, Wastelands. And we're joined for our conversation this week by a special guest, the writer and critic Tevis Thompson. Tevis writes bracingly about video games and game criticism, and I've always been excited by the ways in which his work challenges a lot of the base assumptions that exist within mainstream game criticism and offers up bold new perspectives. You can find his work on his site, tevisthompson.com. Hey, Tevis, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, Carolyn. Really happy to be here. Thanks.
Your current essay is called It's Not Coming Back. It's a 5-part essay about like the best and worst games of 2018, as well as what you see as some of the ways in which maybe a lot of critics and publications fall short of adequately engaging with what games offer us and what they don't offer us.
Right.
The fifth and final part of your essay, which is, as of this recording, is forthcoming, but folks can read the first 4 segments on your site already. That section is called "The Game of the Generation," and your fourth the fourth section ends with what I would call a kind of cliffhanger almost, which is where you reveal in like the final sentence or literally the final word of that piece where there's at least the general direction that you're going, because we know that the 5th piece is called The Game of the Generation, which is a very, very lofty thing to declare. And then I think the final sentence of part 4 is something like, "This was the year of Fortnite." And so we know you're heading toward Fortnite. And it was actually you that got me into Fortnite. I think the battle, I'm competitive shooters, I'm whatever, they're hit or miss with me. It's not like a genre or something where I feel like, I need to try every one of those that comes along.
Right.
You nudged me to trying Fortnite, and it's definitely, as anyone who maybe follows me on Twitter and stuff knows, it's definitely my favorite thing happening in games right now. Mm-hmm. And I think, at least some people have like this derisive, people who maybe aren't familiar with it too much or haven't played it, but just see the kind of culture around the game, have this kind of derisive outlook toward it. But I think for me, a big part of what keeps me coming back to the game is the way that the world of the game feels alive. And, obviously I don't want to get too much into everything you're digging into with whatever the 5th part of your essay, is going to do. But can you just talk a little bit about like why you find Fortnite so fascinating?
Sure. The essay will definitely go into all this in a lot of more detail. Like you, I was kind of caught off guard by Fortnite last year. It's not a genre, like the Battle Royale is not something I knew much about. I wasn't into PUBG. I don't like shooters. There was a lot kind of going against it. And then once it got me, it still hasn't let go, like till last night.
It's like, it was I think yesterday or the day before I was passing through Pleasant Park, and like there's a house in a particular corner of Pleasant Park that seems now, I think, to just be like a pile of rubble. And that is so indicative to me of like the sorts of things that I've, my whole game playing life, my whole life as a player of video games, I have been taken with and drawn to and fascinated by worlds that somehow feel alive and feel like maybe they have more to offer than what's just on the surface. And there's a way in which Fortnite, maybe through constantly evolving in all these big and small ways, maybe pulls that off better than any any game I've played in a particular sense of that.
Right. Because we've had many, powerful game worlds that we've been, lost in.
Absolutely.
Right. We have a whole history of that. But this is different in the way that it works 20 minutes at a time. It's not about its story. It's not about its lore. It's something that's live, right? It feels like it's happening. So things develop a history. Right? The history of that house, right? And not because it has like a lore history, but because you've hidden in the basement, or you've passed through it hundreds of times.
Exactly. It comes to feel. It takes on a kind of familiarity. And when I think of like maps in, just the term map for like a shooter, like, oh, we're adding new maps to, Gears of War multiplayer or whatever. I mean, for players, like being able to develop a real familiarity is key because,
right.
You want to know the ins and outs, but and not that Fortnite's changes are typically like extremely drastic, but they're significant enough that they constantly kind of remind you that don't get like too comfortable.
Right.
Absolutely. Next time you come here, this may be completely different.
Right. There's the little changes that you just kind of notice when you're like, wait, is that the same? So your mind's kind of attuned to the landscape to like notice things that, big and small changes. The big ones are really, really striking sometimes. For me, I was, I think most of last year, Wailing Woods was kind of my go-to place. I would land there often. There was a little house on the edge by the cliffs that I would land on. The woods themselves were very safe to me because I noticed that good players didn't like to go there because you had to build. You couldn't build very easily among the trees. So I would hide there. There was a bunker underneath. I was trying to survive. Fortnite's a game of survival to me, not domination.
100%.
And so I would go there, and I developed a relationship with Wailing Woods. And then suddenly, early this year, I saw on the map them turning yellow. And I was like, what's happening? Mm-hmm. Something's going to happen. And then the next week, a volcano erupted.
Yeah.
And my Wailing Woods was gone. So I feel like one of the ways that it's so powerful is the game is willing to take things away from you, not just constantly add on content. So it's just an accumulation, but it takes things away so that now when I'm on the volcano, I'm like, Wailing Woods was once here.
Yeah.
I remember all of my times in Wailing Woods.
It's not unlike, if you live in a neighborhood for a while and you have like your favorite little corner store or whatever, and then it's just gone. It gets maybe gentrified out or whatever.
Right.
It's like you do feel that pang of like, I remember what came before, and it's just gone now. You can't like load up an earlier version and access it or whatever. It's literally just gone.
Right. And the whole island has evolved this way where like there's very few original quote unquote like landmarks left. Right. Yeah. And to go through a space where the memories of it are kind of haunting you, because I spend a lot of time alone in Fortnite. I avoid people. Yeah. I do not engage very, I'm really good at hiding. I'm really good at
This is so, I love hearing that.
Well, I'm interested in kind of like there's a lot of, you can get good at building, you can get good at shooting. I'm not very interested in either. I am interested in learning the landscape. I'm interested in the psychology of other players. You can really, your eyes become attuned to movement so that you can sit sometimes out in the open. And if you're willing to not move, which is scary, people will not see you.
Yeah.
You're there, but they'll walk right past you. So there's all sorts of like little things that you can learn about like the way people play in the land that will help you survive. And that's all I'm trying to do, get to the final like encounter and survive it. So that landscape is definitely like one of the biggest things that make it so great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our main topic today, Life is Strange.
Hey, FemFreak crew. If you're enjoying the piping hot intersectional feminist analysis and pop culture freakouts we deliver on Feminist Frequency Radio every week, why not join our Patreon community? Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak to help us keep delivering all the feminist media analysis you love. And treat yourself to some of our great perks. Merch discounts, AMAs, bonus episodes, early access, even live events. That's patreon.com/femfreak. Do it today.
Life is Strange 2 centers on Sean and Daniel Diaz, brothers from the Seattle area who go on the run after their father is killed by a police officer. The traumatic event reveals that the younger brother, Daniel, has some sort of untapped telekinetic powers, and as Sean, you're concerned with keeping him safe and helping him to learn to control his capabilities. In episode 3, the brothers camp up with other young travelers, all earning cash by working at a Humboldt County pot farm. And so I guess to get our conversation started today, I want to start by saying, we're recording this. It is Sunday, June 23rd, 2019. And a big thing this weekend was that Trump was tweeting about, and there was all this buildup in, certainly on Twitter and in my Twitter feed, and about a planned massive sort of ICE raid in major cities. You also have just more and more information about the horrors happening in the concentration camps at the border, coming out all the time. And as as these things are happening, and as I'm just sort of taking in like this moment that we're living in history, like there's something specific about it's lending these characters and this story more of a pointed relevance than I wish the story even had to take on. And there's a part of me that, so in episode 3, I feel like we're getting more of a sense that Daniel's powers are potentially quite scary. Like he can't control them entirely, or he doesn't want to. Oh, I mean, why would a young child who has such powers not want to use them? But there's what I keep thinking of, to be honest, is weirdly the opening scene of the original X-Men film, which has a very young, like, Magneto bending the gates of a German concentration camp. And I guess I keep feeling like there's almost a part of me now that it's like I don't expect the story to go there, but it's like I want to see like fan art of Daniel Diaz like leveling the fucking concentration camps. Like I want his like I feel like his rage is so potent in this moment as a kind of potential like reaction to the literal moment that we find ourselves living in.
So I had forgotten quite how difficult it was for me to play this game on the level of just like my constant worry for these two young men versus, me sitting on my couch playing this game where no choices really matter, right? So there's a part of me that's like, I want to just make Boogle House choices in this game and just see where it goes. But the larger part of me is so anxious because I know what the reality is for these young men. And also I know that there is really no sort of like larger happy ending at available at the end of these chapters. Like the story is going to progress in a certain way. And so as much as I might want, Sean and Daniel to go back to their grandparents' house and have a great life and, go to school and everything is great. I know that the game is not going to offer me that, right? So I'm trying to find the safest route for these two young men to navigate the situation that they are in. And I love how the game doesn't allow me any space of comfort because that is the reality outside of the game. We never know where our choices are going to lead. But the fact is that if you occupy certain identity categories, you are playing, as John Scalzi likes to say, like you are playing the game on hard mode. And so I am the worst grandma playing this game because like there'll be a choice and I'm like, oh God, like, should they play throwing knives? What if someone comes through and sees them throwing knives? They're going to see a white kid and some Latino kids. Like who's going to, they're working on a pot farm. Like you guys, is anyone looking? Are there narcs coming? Like I'm just worried constantly.
Me too. And the game, this episode seems to really use some of our anxiety against us, because if you hold to Daniel too hard, he pushes back harder, right?
Yeah.
So the consequences of our anxiety and our care, and our wider awareness, both of like the game and the society they're in, trying to guide this when we can't guide it. I feel disempowered constantly, despite my brother has this power, but I don't have it, or Sean doesn't have it. You're trying to be a good brother. You're trying to avoid the worst outcomes, and yet if you hold too tight on that, then just very natural human things are going to happen. And I found Daniel's reaction to me often very believable. As in, I'm an older brother myself, and my younger brother is exactly the distance in age that Daniel is. So it was I was like, wow, right on, Donald. Like, you guys got it.
How did you handle growing up with an X-Men younger brother?
I mean, there's something about the specific position, too, that Sean is in this episode that makes where I as a player really felt like the ways in which he's pulled in different directions. I mean, of course, as an older brother, he wants to be responsible. He's extremely concerned about Daniel's well-being and safety, and probably also trying to make sure that Daniel doesn't accidentally use his powers to hurt others or do things that he's going to end up regretting or that he doesn't want to do. But I mean, you also Sean is also a teenager who here finds himself in the company of other young people who are, maybe a little bit more, sort of a little older, a little more like well-traveled. I mean, in some ways, possessed of what we might call a sort of like worldly sophistication or something. And you totally, and particularly with the character of Cassidy in the mix, in this group of people that Sean and Daniel have found themselves, have kind of fallen in with, like, you absolutely understand that. I mean, Sean wants to be, I forget if he's like 17, like he wants to be a young guy who gets to like fall in love and spend time with new people and maybe, and, have sex and like do these things. And the situation is such that like, these things are placed at odds, and it's like I really feel for him. Like, of course, I feel a certain responsibility to Daniel, but I'm also like, but I don't want to miss out on this on these opportunities to pursue, what's on offer here with these other people.
Oh yeah, every time the game offered me the choice to like drink something or smoke up, I was like, God, I really want to do this. I've got an 11-year-old that I gotta watch. And again, there's just this bifurcation between knowing that, okay, yeah, Sean, this 17-year-old, although he is not by any means in an ideal environment, nevertheless, he is not free to explore the full range of that experience, to have, a sort of, summer romance with Cassidy, or with Finn for that matter, because he already is Daniel's caretaker, and that is his primary identity at this point, and he can't shake it off, even in those moments where he would absolutely love to shake it off.
So let's talk a bit about Cassidy as a character, because you first meet Cassidy in episode 2 at the Christmas tree, the Christmas market, and she is sitting there strumming her guitar. She's just got this like amazing voice. She's warm, she's sincere, and she really, to me anyway, she doesn't feel like a kind of fantasy figure. She feels very flesh and blood, like very real, but she also feels like that kind of authentic person who, if you, as Sean, you meet a person like that, and there is that sense of like, oh, this person or this encounter could like change my life in some way, or this is someone I'm going to remember in some way for the rest of my life. And so, of course, you want to, to use a phrase from the game Gone Home, like Cassidy to me has like a big gold star around her. Like you're just, I at least as the player understand, or I feel like my Sean anyway is like drawn to her on some level. Like he wants to know her, he wants to be around her, he wants to like spend time with her, and so I think. And I think the way that character has been crafted and designed is like that being successful is crucial to this episode, like just working. And for me, it does work on that level.
Yeah, I have to say I felt like I was a bad brother because so there's the part of us that is feeling responsible and anxious and wanting to care. And then there's a part of us that's just kind of melding with the character at times.
Yes.
And just identifying. And this Cassidy activated me in some way that I was like, oh man, like you are like exactly, she reminded me of a first relationship. Specifically, she, even her like Southern accent, I'm from Kentucky. I think it's important. Actually, she's from Texas. Given this story and where it's headed towards the border, even though it would be the California, I guess, Arizona border. But there's something about her and her gentleness and her, I think the way her character is developed, the writing and the character design and just the gentle like tenderness with which she treats Sean, especially in the lake and in the sex scene, like in the tent. It's so you just these kind of things do not happen in games. And when Sean is very he's very believable as an inexperienced young man, and she treats him like it's done very realistically. He's embarrassed, he probably didn't last long. It didn't go like he had imagined, and she treats him with such kindness that is so in his circumstances right now so welcome, and so that intimacy that he has with his brother, but it's so fraught with the situation and Daniel pulling away and the power and all that. So anyway, I just found Cassidy utterly captivating as a character, and I developed this kind of tunnel vision. Like when I when I was younger, especially, and I like someone, suddenly no one else like exists. I'm just like focused on them, and it makes me feel bad because there's actually this, this episode has a lot of interesting characters and a lot of dynamics, and I felt, oh man,
sorry, Ingrid and Anders, you're getting short shrifted here.
Right. I mean, I want to usually in these games, you want to explore everything, you want to talk to everybody, and I was just like Cassidy, and I was like, oh man, what's going? But the game I was like really impressed that the game let me do that, and it followed the consequences of that, so that when the ending happens, when Daniel is reacting to me and I'm like, he's not wrong, that all I want to do is like pay attention to Cassidy. That I'm just like, damn game, you got the human dynamics here real, and you brought it in a way that like, I'm still caring about all the other stuff, but for a while when I'm with Cassidy, like it happens in life, everything else kind of falls away. And then I have to kind of remind myself not only, what's going on, but my responsibility as a brother, and I'm playing this game, and I'm a little lost in a way that I don't get lost playing games very often because I don't fall in love with characters very much. There's just not enough well-written like characters like her. So yeah, it created a lot of like realistic, I don't know, feelings.
Yeah, and I mean that sex scene it was really refreshing to me in that like it was so not what I expected going in. Like for all of the care and authenticity that the game takes in so many other areas, I still expected that to be fairly cliche, but I didn't expect to get Sean kind of beating himself up a little bit, being like, sorry, it sucked. Like, which is such an, I mean, God, this young man is under like so much pressure in every aspect of his life right now. Just an unimaginable amount of like stress and worry and fear and everything. I don't know, just the way that what happens with Cassidy might sort of exacerbate that, like his feelings of just not being enough to meet the needs of everything happening in his life around him at the moment. How can he possibly be the brother that Daniel needs and make sure that they stay safe when they're on the run from the law and, do this and do that? The game continued to sort of surprise me in its willingness to approach things with more sort of believability than I anticipated it would.
I didn't, I had a very visceral reaction to Cassidy in the last chapter. And it is, I hate to admit this, but it is based purely upon the fact that she carries that guitar everywhere and as a singer-songwriter. And there's nothing that irritates me more than someone who just busts out in this song. And I would run from that camp if that happened. And so while, like you, Tevis, the gentleness that she displays, the way that she has not been hardened or sharpened in the way that Hannah, for instance, has been, is so necessary and so wonderful for Sean, because he too needs a place to land in the way that he's trying to provide that for Daniel. Cassidy, as a romantic object, just did not do it for me. Because my brain was not there. Again, this is Grandma Ebony. This is like state, Forest Ranger Ebony. I found myself being much more drawn to Hannah. So I played this chapter through a couple of times, and I think it's because salty ass Hannah is who I would be in that family. Just like, no nonsense. Let's get it together, people. We're here to make money. Don't bullshit me. Don't blow sunshine up my ass. And also, my goal for this game is to make sure that the Diaz brothers get to Puerto Lobos alive. I feel like they need to stick with Hannah. Like, of everybody around that campfire, Hannah is the one who's, most likely. So I really appreciated on my second playthrough, I didn't realize that there were more conversations you could have with Hannah and find out a bit more about her backstory. So, I was able to, engineer that outcome the last playthrough that I did. And I was like, I was so right. Like, Hannah is with the shits. Like, she's been, I suspect she's the oldest member of the crew. I'm guessing she's got to be 25, 26. She talks about, having been on the road for 10 years. And so I'm just like, God, Sean, Daniel, you're going to hate it, but you need a foster older sister. And I think it needs to be Hannah. And also you need Finn. Oh God, you guys, Finn.
Yeah. Finn is just one of those, he just radiates, shit's going to go bad when you're around.
From the minute he shows up, and when you first come upon Finn throwing knives with Daniel down by the lake, and you see that Daniel has, I'm sure, consciously modeled his attire on Finn with the way he rolls up his pants and what he wears, and I'm just like, this is gonna end badly for Daniel. Get him away.
Yeah. This is so Finn reminds me a little bit of a character in Red Dead Redemption 2, actually. Which is a game that I mostly liked. Tevis hated, and you can read all about it in his aforementioned essay. He goes into great detail, and it's a real pleasure to read. But in Red Dead Redemption 2, there's the camp, there's the Dutch Vanderland gang of outlaws, and within that group is this guy named Micah, who is, he has funny nicknames for everybody. He's kind of, I would say or at least he's meant to be charismatic in a sense, but he also you just sense even from the very, very earliest encounters or your time around him that his energy is going to be part of the downfall of all of this, and it is, and I don't know. I felt some of that in Finn too, but I like the way that the game is able to to kind of couch that within, like, he's this Finn I'm talking about is this figure who he knows he's one of those people. I just feel like this is a real type that we've all encountered, or certainly that I've encountered in my. It's like he knows how to put on the performance of being like the friendly person with the sort of wisdom about like how things work and like, but but there's just something off about it, and they just bring trouble with them like everywhere they go.
Yeah, I think one of the big differences with Micah, I mean, Micah's like a pure piece of shit, right?
Yeah,
like he's like a piece of shit person, and
yeah,
and I mean, and he functions as like a pure villain in there that allows like Dutch to be the complicated villain, whereas here,
right.
I think Life is Strange is really good at taking a character who makes us nervous, who is trouble, and yet, at least in my playthrough, Finn. He was allowed to be more, relatively complicated. Like he wasn't a villain. He wasn't. There were parts of him that I understood. There were things he said that I was like, "Well, you're not wrong," but there's some sort of edge to it. But I think that Life is Strange it did this with Claire in episode 2, where she has qualities that I'm kind of like, right. But it's treating her with a full kind of like, dimensions as a person and allowing her to be, herself and, complicated. I mean, it still has room to allow us to have villains too, like in the first episode, that storekeeper racist, is just bad. I mean, he's just bad. I don't need to know his like, softer side. I'm not interested. And like, it's okay to have characters like that too. But a lot of these other characters who are, just complicated in the way that people are, and yet we can read them and they play in the story in a believable way. And Life is Strange seems to just be really good at allowing the complexity of characters to, play on us in different ways, whether it's how Cassidy plays on us differently versus based, on what we like or what bothers us. Because she did a few things that I could tell the characters were reacting to her not like I was. They were like, "Oh, here she goes again, drama queen." And I was like, "No, I want to hear more.
I want a tattoo.
I love this drama." So like, it really is really good at that.
Yeah, I think the game for me was so excellent about not prematurely, ever sort of, judging me based upon my reception to like this seductiveness of someone like Finn. Because I know that everything he suggests, while not, springing from malicious intent or sort of like overt selfishness, nevertheless, he's the guy around whom everything will go wrong. Right. He's got a very outsized sense of like his own, competence and sense of charm, right? And I was drawn to that, which is a problem I need to unpack in my own life. But, I don't feel like the game was sort of winking at me as if to suggest, like, all right, if you spend any more time with Finn, upon your head be it. Right. I love how this game sort of, opens these choices up to you. And as it continues to remind you, like, there will be consequences. If A, then B, then C. But because it fleshes out these different characters and not just their sort of, personal allure, but then what the larger allure of that is Finn and his very freewheeling kind of, this vision of himself as this, kind of bandit on the open road. You can see why that would appeal to Sean and to Daniel. So, the game doesn't just like, you're making a stupid choice here.
Right.
If you follow this.
No, it seems really respectful of us as players, and that not winking you say, right? It's like, it's this kind of sincerity and earnestness, which is throughout the entire game. And that like is not that common in games with story heavy or like that have choices like that. It really, I don't know. It just gives you this feeling of I don't know. There's something about it that I think I keep trying to think about what's the appeal of why is this appealing to me in this way that like other story-based or choice games like this. What's happening in this that is activating me in some way? And I think part of it, it's kind of like in those moments, that we do nothing, right? So the game is full of those moments, like right before the campfire on the last night, you can just sit there, right? And the game offers so many moments of just being, right? Of just kind of soaking it in and feeling it out, feeling yourself out. I remember back when, in the Amazing Adventures of Captain Spirit, when Chris would lay on his mom's bed and listen to her favorite song, the Moon and Moon, the Bat for Lashes song, or the first Life is Strange had this. It has these moments that are, I think we first experience as teenagers, that where you're just like, you're quiet, you're alone, you're kind of in the world differently. And I think that's why the games have a little bit of this earnest adolescent quality that makes them endearing and makes them very, I don't know, I feel like I don't feel safe in the game for the characters, but I trust the game in a way that I don't always trust other games.
Right.
What is it called in games? Is it like a save spot? Or something? But that's the way we experience adolescence, right? When we're going through it, right? There are these moments that feel so crystalline and so weighty,
right?
And it's like our life has hit like a save spot,
Right.
And we can always sort of remember where we were and what we felt in that moment that feels very distant and away from how we experience adulthood.
Right. As an adult, you seem like sometimes you're just trying to grab those moments where you can, and like, they're rarer and rarer, and the meaning is, moments are not so full of meaning as they seem to once be. And yet this game is kind of putting that back at the forefront and saying these are valuable. It's not like, this is not a game where you're going to use your telekinetic powers to do cool shit like video games do. I mean, it's you're going to sit there and do nothing. And that's like a really innovative thing.
Carol, games. I don't know that the concentration camps are going to get raised by Daniel's power.
I don't expect that the game is going in that direction. But I do feel like the Life is Strange games exist apart from. I mean, when I think of maybe one of the closest analogs to the Life is Strange games, which would be the sort of Telltale's. Adventure, narrative-driven adventure games where you're making choices. And in those games, I think I always felt like I was, in a sense, being judged or, like put in these situations where there's no good choice and you do something.
Daniel will remember this, right?
It'll always say that on the screen, that so-and-so will remember this. And it's like, oh, fuck, I feel like an asshole or whatever. Whereas like the feeling that I get from Life is Strange's attitude toward me as the player is one much more of, man, you're in a really tough situation and I'm sure you're doing the best that you can, in that situation, right? That's never what I got from say, The Walking Dead, but I just, Life is Strange just feels so different in that regard, and I just appreciate that so much.
I am blown away by how this game, despite all of the just like the avalanche of small and large things that can and do go wrong for these kids, how I am left hopeful at the end of each chapter. And there's, as ridiculous as this is, there's nevertheless a small part of me that's like, if I just play this right, there is a way in which Dad doesn't die. Like there's some like, secret way, right? And so I keep going back, even though I know that's not possible. But I'm like, if I figure out the secret way and I promise not to tell anyone, but just give me the option. I can figure out if I go left, right, left, up. Like I will figure it out.
Yeah, I'm reading Donna Tartt's novel, The Goldfinch, right now, and I'm still quite early on, but and this isn't really a spoiler because it's sort of the basis for the entire story. But like near the very beginning of the book, the narrator, he and his mother go to a New York art museum, and there's an explosion, a bomb set by who knows who yet, that hasn't come out yet. And his mother is killed, and a lot of the initial grief of Theo's. He is stuck in that visit to the museum and in that moment and constantly thinking like, if only I'd said, Mom, let's go get breakfast that morning, or if only I'd done this, if only I'd done that, or if only like our meeting at school was set for that morning instead of that morning, or this, like thinking through all the million factors. And, there is that weird, I think in grief and in any sort of, often any moment where our lives seem to take an irrevocable turn, like there is that tendency toward the fascination of like what could I have done differently, or how why can't I get that moment back? Why can't I do it again? And the ways in which, like, no, I mean, but it has the ultimate, like, the difficulty of accepting that is the way that things played out, and will always be the way that things played out.
Mm-hmm.
It really, like, that sense of the contingency of things, right? That when those events happen in your life, that your sense of control is so, thrown in your face, that you don't have what you thought you had, that you can't, change those things. In fact, it feels like all the choices in this game are like in the shadow of the one thing you can't change, right? The one thing.
Yes.
It all proceeds from there, and it shades it all kind of differently. And when I finished this last episode, I read a few reviews online and saw people complaining, oh, there's not enough choices. I don't have enough control. There's not enough happening. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, one, if like these characters aren't enough for you to be invested, I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
But also like this focus on like what, where are the mechanics here? Like what choice I want to feel like consequential. And I'm like, don't you think disempowerment's part of the idea here? And like, and isn't like the choices, these constrained choices, you're playing young men who are constrained by so many things, even before their dad was killed. Even there was so many things going on that like, it just feels like the choices here are always tinged with this, with these constraints. They're always, it just kind of, it knows what's up, and it seems like against what a lot of players, or at least some that I saw, like what they seem to want, or what the sense of control the games promise, and that life doesn't give you.
Even the fundamental choice, or just design, the fundamental just narrative conceit here, that in Life is Strange 1, you were the one with the powers,
right.
You had as Max, and I mean, I think just even right from the get-go, like, oh, there's a character with powers, but it's not me. Like, that's weird. I'm the player. I'm supposed to be the one with the powers.
Right.
As opposed to just trying to carefully manage the one with the powers. I mean, just fundamentally, like, it is sort of a lack of like the kind of player power to have any situation play out the way that you ultimately want it to play out is kind of denied almost in the very premise of the game. Mm-hmm. So episode 3 ends with the final shot we get is of Sean alone now marching down a road in what seems to be the blistering heat, and there's a pretty threatening voiceover about how we have ways of dealing with cop killers like you, or something along those lines. And so I'm hopeful that as the game continues into its 4th and 5th episodes, that it continues to really place these characters within a political context that resonates with the one in which we're actually living today.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried going forward, because I have every reason to trust the game from these 3 episodes. But I remember when I played the first Life is Strange, my feelings by the end of episode 3, which is where I think the big thing with Max and Chloe and rewriting the past in a more dramatic way happens. And
yes.
And it's powerful, but it's after that point that for me that game kind of went off the rails and got too focused on its power, too focused on its plot. Got to a point where it was no more moments of doing nothing, and instead you're making choices about saving, one person versus the many and all this kind of stuff that I was not interested in.
That's the best choice in video games ever.
But I guess I'm just looking forward and like just being like, oh, come on. Like just
Please-
like, the nervousness when you
don't
like
fuck it up.
anything and it heads into like the home stretch and you're like, come on, stick
right,
the landing,
because-
do something, either surprise me or just, I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know if we're going to meet their mother. I don't know if, she has a power too. Is that why she left? What's going on there? What's going to be at the border? What's there's so many possibilities. And then I'm afraid of video games and endings.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid.
That's the pull quote for this episode.
And it just,
I feel you. I mean,
I'm hopeful too.
A bad ending can just cast a pall on everything that comes before.
I know.
I think it speaks to how much we like what this game has done thus far that we're really concerned that it it ends well.
Right.
All right, everyone. We'll be right back with our weekly freakouts.
Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners, why don't you join our Patreon community at patreon.com/femfreak? You'll love it. Now, on with the show.
All right, everybody. Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Tevis, why don't you get us started? What's your deal?
So, my Freak Out is a game that I've been playing the past couple months. I've played some good games this year. Nothing's like kind of blown me away like Fortnite, and I've continued to play Fortnite. But the past couple months, I've been playing a game on Switch called Lyrica. It is a it is a rhythm game that takes classical Chinese poetry and sets it to a more modern sound. I mean, there's a lot of genres it kind of covers. There's rock and ballads and anthems and a cappella, but it's broadly kind of pop music. And so it takes these like classical Chinese poems, a lot from the Tang Dynasty, and there's a story mode that actually has the characters from the present. In dreams, they meet Li Bai and Du Fu, these Tang poets that are really great. And so anyway, it's not really about the reason I love the game so much. The story's fine. It's kind of earnest and sincere, and I like that. But the music is so good. Any rhythm game, depends, it rises or falls based on its songs. And the songs here, it's not just that they're, taking classical Chinese poetry and setting them to music. It also kind of evokes calligraphy on the screen, so that you're not just getting in rhythm in the time, getting the time right, but on space of the screen, you are tapping in different places, sometimes drawing like Chinese characters. But you're doing this all towards, I don't know, just kind of melding with the music. And the music is, it's not in English. The game is in English, but the songs are not. They are mostly in Mandarin. There's some, I think, songs from Taiwanese indigenous groups. And so I'm playing it, and it's so fascinating to me to play a game where, I know a tiny, tiny little bit of Chinese, not enough to understand the songs. So I'm listening, and I'm, playing a rhythm game I don't understand. You can look up the lyrics, you can look up the poems that they're based on, but yet I'm connecting so much to the feeling of these songs. You can feel the loss, you can feel the excitement and joy, and it's just. I don't know. I don't play a ton of rhythm games, but this one has really struck me as this, both kind of a daily thing to play. It's a bit meditative. It's a kind of lovely aesthetic experience, but it's really strange to get songs caught in your head in a different language, right? So it's like, what's happening in my own head? I don't know these words, and yet I can hear it in my head. But I just find that this game's ability to connect you to something that is not necessarily familiar. I mean, I guess it educates you a little bit, but it's just so beautifully done. And Yeah, I've just loved it.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Ebony, what are you freaking out about this week?
The world.
Yeah.
Quite literally. I don't have a standard freak out this week because I've actually been unable to sit still and really watch anything or read anything or play anything because I'm just so worried and horrified. I'm so concerned about what ICE is doing. I can't stop thinking about what's going on with these children in these cages. I'm in disbelief and yet, complete utter belief that, our commander in chief has been, credibly accused of rape, and yet this doesn't appear to be much of a conversation that anyone is paying attention to. So my freak out is the fucking state of the world. I don't know what to do. My brain won't settle on anything, not even as a method of, what's called self-care, I can't unplug at the moment because I just keep thinking if, God willing, we make it out of this horrific historical moment, am I going to be able to, oh my God, this is the worst freak out ever. Am I going to be able to live with myself when I look back and see what I did,
Right.
to stand up against power, against the forces that are, oh my God, executing such diabolical practices, like at the end of the day, what will I have done so that I can live with myself? And I don't know what the answer is yet. But I am quite sure that, planning another Doctor Who limited run podcast is not what's going to allow me to sleep at night. So I have no media freak out this week. I apologize, our audience of 3 listeners. I am just freaking out. On to you, Carol.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to piggyback on that because, I know this is going to seem like a pretty dramatic shift, but I hope that it makes a kind of emotional or psychological sense. So this past week, Polygon published a profile of Anita and Feminist Frequency, and as a result of, and we'll link to that in the show notes and show description, but as a result of that, that being published, Twitter for me this past week has felt an awful lot like Twitter of 5 years ago did. Twitter at the heart of Gamergate, because there literally are they haven't missed a beat. There are all these men, and they are almost all men, who they are tweeting. And I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, because these are the types of people who, and this is part of what's fucked up about living this way is you feel like there's a concern that any and everything you say is going to be scrutinized for anything you say that might be exploitable by by certain people, so that they can, so basically there are videos being published on YouTube by ranting, anti-feminist men, basically celebrating the fact that feminist frequency is quote unquote dead or whatever, which it's not, and also that feminist frequency lost, which is, to me, it's so absurd. So the dominant narrative among a lot of feminist frequencies detractors for so long, apparently, I thought it was maybe empty rhetoric or something, but apparently a lot of them actually believed that feminist frequency's aim was sort of to institute a kind of oppressive feminist new world order in which female characters in video games are, I don't know, shapeless, sexless. I don't know. I honestly can't even wrap my head around what what they think the world under the feminist frequency regime would look like. But they are like, but I keep wanting to say and I've never used this word on the podcast before, I don't think, and I use it very, very rarely, but I keep wanting to say, motherfuckers, we kicked so much fucking ass. The conversation around video games is categorically different now than it was when tropes started. Yeah. Representations of women in games have improved, dramatically. Activist work is not about, you're never going to create the world that you actually want. It's that you fight for the world that you want. You make some incremental, tiny, whatever little scraps of progress you can, building on the work of people who came before and making things a little bit better for those who will come next and carry on the fight. And I don't know, somehow all of these things just sort of collide in my mind of all these dudes who, on one hand, are thrilled that they believe that feminist frequency has failed or whatever, or that's the narrative they're feeding themselves. They're also parroting that I don't know, sexism in games doesn't exist or something. But when we live in a world where, patriarchy, white supremacy, misogyny is so pervasive, and you the fact that, another, as you said, another credible, I don't even want to call it a rape accusation, another tale of the president raping another, woman has come out, and nobody. It feels like the world doesn't even bat an eye, and things just progress as they were. It's enough to make me feel like a character in one of those thrillers, a gaslighting thriller, like a Hitchcockian gaslighting thriller or something, where a character knows for a fact that things are a certain way. Of course we live under patriarchy, of course we live under white supremacy. It's it couldn't be more apparent. And yet every the world is carrying on around me as if no, it's normal, it's fine, everything's fine. It's this strange feeling of a break with reality that I'm carrying around inside of me. And all these elements, it may seem weird to link, a profile of feminist frequency with that, but these things in the cultural ecosystem, they're, again, the links between anti-feminist, and the people who led the charge of, Gamergate, against Anita and Zoe and feminist frequency and so on. They're all also, almost all of them also alt-right, pro-Trump. These things are not, they do not exist in complete isolation from each other. There is a shared kind of DNA there linking all of the shit. And anyway, it's just the strangest feeling. And that's all I have to say about that.
What I am, fascinated by and also find hilarious is the way in which the financials are the primary concern for a certain segment of that group. So the hashtag get woke, go broke, right?
Yeah.
is trending in conjunction with this conversation. As if the effectiveness of a movement can be measured by how much money that movement made, this sort of very capitalist notion that if what you are doing is right, and if it resonates with people, then you will be able to make money. off of that, in perpetuity. And so part of why some people were angry with Anita and Feminist Frequency is that, there were people who were willing to financially support, and so the fact that that does not appear to be the case to them to the same extent is like, that's proof that your message doesn't mean anything because you're no longer able to make money. Also, it does not, the people who are listening to this podcast know this already, but Anita did not make $20 million for shows versus video games. Trust me, if she did, things would look much different. Yeah, this number blows me away that people trot this number out, contrary to reason and fact.
And it also reveals how there's like no actual consistency whatsoever, because the same people who are like, hashtag get woke, go broke, like many of these people have been parroting the absurd lie for the past 5 years plus that Anita is like a master scam / con artist, and this is all like, we don't believe anything we do. We're just doing it as some sort of grift to rake in like literally, yes, tens of millions of dollars. And now like they, a story comes out that kind of says, hey, we don't have the operating budget anymore that we used to. And these same people are like, LOL, of course they ran out of money. Hashtag get woke, go broke. Like, I mean, which is it? Like, were we fucking, pulling the wool over everyone's eyes and raking in millions of dollars, or it just belies, like, it's just, there's no core whatsoever, no rational, logical, philosophical, intellectual, no core whatsoever, other than like, other than like a hatred of women, really, and a hatred of the idea of this kind of social justice movement that we represent.
Yeah.
Can I ask you both? How? So, I guess I'm just wondering how how it feels different compared to 5 years ago, to confront Gamergate, people now in this reality, in this world versus like 2014, because it just seems like I saw a phrase, I think last week on the internet somewhere, like somebody referring to the president as a kind of malignant normality, that there's something with that once that seeps in, and once, when they cry out victory and you look around you and it's, I don't know. I'm trying to feel out the difference between now and 5 years ago. It feels different and worse, and how you think about them and their role and their connection to this current moment and this ongoing moment that has no end in sight, right? How do you? I'm wondering how you both experienced it.
I will say that I feel like I'm, on one hand, I'm shouting like, we told you so. We told you so. We told you these were like deep, deep issues in our culture that, that like this shit matters because it's not just video games. It's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger. And like that, even now as the proof is like, written on the walls in blood for everyone to see, it's like that people are still not really listening. I mean, that of course there's the core group that's been pretty consistent of people who get it, and thank God for that, because it's sometimes the only thing keeping me sane is that, okay, at least there are some other people who feel this and see it. But like, the fact that it feels like, to me, it feels like being a frog that's being like slowly boiled, and the water temperature just keeps rising and rising and rising and rising and rising. Or I'm watching that happen, but as we're being boiled, most people are like, don't feel it and aren't reacting to it. And it's just like the heat, the levels just become the new normal. It just becomes the new normal. It becomes the new normal. It becomes the new normal. And I'm like screaming my head off, like, why do something? Like, why are we just letting this happen? Like, do do you still not understand what's happening? How can you still not understand what's happening?
Yeah, it's interesting for me because, of course, I wasn't part of Feminist Frequency 5 years ago. I was on the outside, watching in disgust as, the sort of Gamergate coalesced around its, hard, turdy center. And so now, being nominally on the inside of it, I'm just, I'm kind of amazed because it felt like, we were at least making some sort of progress culturally, steam cleaning the carpets and rooting this stuff out, only to find out that no, we got to pull all of this stuff up. Like it's rotten.
The foundation's rotten.
Underneath exactly. We may just have to move. And it's all of a piece. But I got to be honest, like I joke around about how these, troll dudes are obsessed with our money. I can't get over the fact that people thought it needed to be $20 million.
It's so
do you know what we would have been able to do if we had $20 million? Like the workshops we would have funded, the conferences, the scholarships, like what we would have been able to do with $20 million. You would have known if my ass had access to $20 million. It wouldn't have been a secret,
Well, anyway, you can submit your own freak out at feministfrequency.com/freakout. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the Freakin' After Party, only available to backers of this podcast, which you can be. Learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. This show is engineered by Rob Pera. Sarah Norales provides technical support. Artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found, and if you haven't yet, go to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review us. It really helps. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. Our guest today was Tevis Thompson. You can find his work at TevisThompson.com. Tevis, thanks again so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture. Thanks for listening. Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks.
Bye.